The greatest trick the devil pulled isn't convincing the world that it doesn't exist. It's convincing the world that our greatest evil is immigration. Welcome to the fight against fascism. First of all, I want to say thank you to those who watched and commented on my first video where I talked about 10 reasons why the Green Party will save us. There was a lot of skepticism, and that's absolutely fine. This is going to be a long battle. It's likely to be around 4 years until the next general election. And I think we need to get ideas out there. I think we need to have conversations and discussions. We don't all have to agree with each other, but I hope that we can learn a little bit of something from each other. And I'm reading all of your comments and reflecting on them. And I hope we can learn together. So let's focus on the theme of this video then. I want to talk about the greatest evil, and spoiler alert, it's not immigration. Now, you can have your views on immigration. You know, we can feel differently about it. We're all citizens of this country. We all deserve to have a voice, and we all deserve to be able to express that voice. And when you have large levels of immigration, which occur in short periods of time, it can change communities. And change is something that we have to adjust to. And some of us don't want to make certain adjustments, right? Look, all I want to say is I don't want to make immigration the focus of this video, because it isn't. But all I'm saying is that we have the right to have different views and to express different views. But what I want to talk about is what is actually, really, fundamentally making our life worse. Because look, we're all seeing it. We're all beginning to recognize it, that life is getting more difficult, right? The cost of living is becoming higher. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Our high streets are falling into disarray in so many parts of the country. The cost of rent and housing is getting more and more expensive. And the basic essentials of life are becoming more unaffordable for more of us in this country. Now, you've been told, or many of you have been told, that the reason for that is immigration. What I want to make clear today is that that's not the main reason. Again, immigration is not going to be the focus here. You may have problems with immigration for other reasons, but the main reason that you are experiencing financial difficulty right now in your life is because of inequality. Now, hear me out, okay? Let me just talk about this a little bit. Now, there are a few statistics that I want to go through and discuss today. And the first thing that I want to talk about is wealth inequality, looking at each 10% of the population. So looking at the top 10%, the bottom 10%, and how it's distributed. Now, if we look at this, we can see that for the bottom 10%, basically there's virtually no wealth. Okay, so the bottom 10% of wealthy individuals have virtually nothing. The top 10% have a massive amount. Okay, and you can see that on the graph right now. What you can also see is the top 1% and how much they possess. Now, they're outstripping the wealth of almost everyone else in this country. Okay, why is that a problem? Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's have a look at another statistic, and we can see that here. So the top 50 families in the UK, in terms of wealth holdings, they hold as much wealth, in fact, even more wealth, than the bottom 50% of the entire country. This is in the UK. Okay, and you can see that £466 billion held by the top 50 families. Massive inequality. Again, what's the issue here? Well, we'll talk about it. Let's have a quick look at inequality when it comes to regions. So we can see that the Southeast is doing very nicely, thank you very much. Household wealth on average over £500,000, which is almost double the household wealth in areas such as myself, in where I live in the East Midlands, and more than double when it comes to Yorkshire and the Humber. Okay, and if you look right at the bottom there, the Northeast, you can see it's the lowest level. You know, much lower, or around about a third, more or less, compared to the Southeast. Now, it's no coincidence that those who are more likely to vote for parties such as Reform are those who live in wealth-deprived areas. Think about it. Think about it, right? If you are in a situation where you don't have wealth, where you feel financially insecure, and you're being told, here's the answer, it's to do with immigrants, okay, that's the option you're going to choose because that's what you believe to be the case. I'm here, though, to say that that isn't the reason for the wealth disparity, because it's not the immigrants who've got all the money. Okay. Let's have a look at one final point together, which is this one. So it's focusing on the top 1%. So we can see here that since 1980, the share of income earned by the top 1% in the UK has generally been growing. It hit 14.7% in 2007, but we still need to look at what's happening much more recently, because the top 1% share of net household income rose to a new high in 2019 and continues to increase. Okay, so this is just 1% of the population holding wealth of almost 15% of the entire country. Those figures, they're not mathing, right? That's not what we want to have ideally in a well-functioning economy. Now, let me talk a little bit about why that is. So the reason for that is because if you have a small group of people who become too wealthy, they are basically in a position to buy up all of the country's assets. This is something that you'll have heard people like Gary Stevenson talk about, you know, the real scourge of inequality, the fact that you can't compete with them. You can't compete when you've got people who've got £1 billion who are generating interest of £1 million a week, and the only thing they can do with it is to keep buying assets. So if they buy up all of the properties in the country, then what's going to happen? Those properties are going to become less affordable for ordinary families. How are you going to compete with someone who's generating £1 million per week just based on having a high interest account? Yeah, because they're so wealthy. So this is the issue. When you get to a situation where too much wealth accumulates in too few hands, it means essentially that you create a snowball effect where that will just continue to be the case. The wealthier people in society, the wealthiest people in society, will just get more and more rich. And those who are in the lower percentages, the lower deciles, they'll just continue to get poorer because you're competing with each other. You see, this takes me back to the quotation at the beginning of the video about the devil convincing you that the biggest issue is immigration. It's inequality. It's inequality because it's not just about the fact that someone's got more money than you, so therefore you're envious of the fact that they've got that cash. It's the power that cash brings, the power to buy up assets, the power to control the economy, because then they get too big to fail, right? Everyone starts talking about, oh, we need to bow to these rich people because if they take their money out of the country, what are we going to do? And these rich people can also buy the politicians. So they're in a position where they're able to set the agenda because of the fact that they're paying the people who are basically creating our legislation. They pay for the Tory party with their big donations. They pay for the Labour Party. Yeah, you got the trade union donations, but more and more they've been accommodating towards big business. We all know about Lord Ali and the gifts that he buys Keir Starmer, the donations that he makes to the party. And I'll tell you who they definitely have purchased, and that is Reform. So let's have a quick look at this, shall we? I just want to go through some of the big donors to Reform UK. So Nick Candy, a billionaire property developer, former Tory party donor, by the way. He was actually appointed Treasurer of Reform in December of 2024. So he's a big supporter of Reform UK. Christopher Harborne, as well, Thailand-based billionaire involved in tech investing, crypto, aviation, fuel. So massive donor. He gave Farage's Brexit party, incarnation before Reform, around £10 million in 2019. He's not directly donated to Reform yet, to be fair, but he is a former strong associate of Nigel Farage. Of course, there was the Elon Musk donation, which was mooted until they had a public spat, falling out. But there are others. Fiona Cottrell, the mother of Farage's former chief of staff, donated £500,000 to Reform in late 2024. David Lilly, an experienced mining and metals trainer and CEO of investment fund Drakewood Capital, has given Reform 274 grand since 2023. And the list goes on. Okay? Now, why am I going through all this? Because I want to demonstrate the fact that reform are not going to do anything to deal with the biggest issue in society. They're not going to deal with inequality. They're not going to do what needs to be done, which is, you guessed it, to tax the wealthiest. Okay? Now look, okay, it's difficult to do that, right? It's difficult to tax the wealthiest because you say, oh, well, they're going to leave the country, although they can't take their assets with them, of course. But, you know, there is going to be a difficulty then in calculating, well, how much are their assets worth? You know, what methodology do we use to determine that? Is it going to take more time and effort than it's actually worth to do it all? And look, these are the debates and the discussions that we need to have. But the point is that if we don't focus on inequality, if we don't learn more about it, if we don't realize how it's affecting our lives and how it's making us poor and keeping us poor and is going to make us even poorer as time goes on, and we obsess over immigration instead, we're not going to be in a position to deal with the problem that we have. I say this. I say, let's vote for a party that isn't controlled by the richest in society, that doesn't rely on billionaire donors to exist. That party is the Green Party. Yeah, they're not in hock to the billionaire class. They're not there to serve their donors. They're there to serve us, ordinary, general members of the public who just want a better lives for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for our kids, our communities. And the challenge is going to be tough. Of course it's going to be tough. But for goodness sake, don't we need to have politicians in a position of power who actually want to tackle the problem, who actually want to focus on the problem that is causing the biggest issue within our society? I'll finish by saying this. Just because people like Farage and the BBC and ITV and the Labour Party and the Tories aren't talking about inequality, that doesn't mean it isn't the biggest problem that we face. That's just a demonstration of the fact that it is. Because all the people that benefit from inequality, the richest people in society, the people with massive salaries, they don't want to talk about it. And they don't want you talking about it either. They want to sweep it under the rug. And they'll happily let you keep on talking about immigration, just as Sky News, run by billionaire Rupert Murdoch, will keep talking about immigration, just as GB News, funded again by extremely rich, shady individuals, will keep talking about immigration, just as the Daily Mail will keep talking about immigration, again, massively rich people running that newspaper, just as the Sun, part of the Murdoch empire, will keep talking about immigration. They'll keep focusing on immigration, because as long as you keep talking about immigration and obsessing over immigration, you won't talk about inequality, you won't think about inequality, and you won't look to a political party that will have the power of government, the power of the state, the power of running the House of Commons to actually do something to try and deal with this scourge which is making us all poorer. I'm an ordinary person. Pretty much everybody watching this video, whoever's watching it, you're ordinary people. We should be in this together. We should be challenging the plutocrats, right? The plutocrats, extremely rich people who want to run our politics, our society, for the benefit of themselves. We should be challenging those people. We should be using our strength, coming together in order to do that. And we should be voting for political parties that actually want to deal with inequality and deal with taking some of that wealth, redistributing some of that wealth to just give us a bit of breathing space to get our heads above water so we can deal with the cost of living, crumbling infrastructure, massively skyrocketing house prices, all the things that are causing us to despair and turn on ourselves. Let's vote for a party that actually wants to deal with this and do something to challenge that vested power and wealth, which I argue is the biggest issue we face in society right now. Not just in the UK, by the way, but across the entire Western world. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear what your feedback is. And please do consider subscribing and giving this video a like if you think I've said anything that makes sense. If you don't, fair enough. Let me know about it in the comments. Take care, guys.